Okay, welcome everyone. Not tonight, today, we have Mamta Suri joining us. Mamta has 20 years experience building and leading engineering teams at places like Oracle, Workday, and DocuSign, platforms that serve hundreds of millions of users. She also founded Admit Me, an AI-powered college admissions tool she's quite passionate about. So she's got both the big company and the startup experience. On top of that, she runs a podcast called AI Unfiltered, where she cuts through all the noise and talks about how AI is actually being used in the real world. She's a speaker, an advisor, and has been recognized as one of the inspirational women in STEM and tech. And with that, Mamta, the mic is all yours.
Hi
Please take
everyone,
it over.
really happy to be here, and I'll be talking about one of the topics that I think all of us are dealing with right now. So let me just first of all go ahead and share my screen. All right, so basically, we keep hearing this that AI is making individual work visibly faster. And we are also having layoffs around these because now AI is able to do the work of 10 people. So just because AI is there, it doesn't really mean that the organization becomes faster. So the bottleneck is moving from building the software to what actually we are delivering in production. So AI compressed the delivery loop, right? So basically, with vibe coding, the things that used to take longer, like requirements, PRDs, prototypes, even talking to customers, wireframes, API definitions, and all of those things. Now, vibe coding has replaced all of that. You can actually build something really quickly and see it in action. So the point is that it's not that AI is writing the code, that it's the whole path that was starting from the intention to what we see and can play around with is collapsing. So in the past, right, we've had things like prioritization and architecture discussions before we start to build anything. But now AI has removed some of that friction, which is great. We can now use actual, instead of just wireframes, actual product ideas to show it to customers, get their feedback quickly. But it also means that teams can build ahead of the judgment. So we need to make sure what we are building is the right thing and how we are building it and how we are landing it in the production is the correct thing. So speed creates the illusion of maturity. Just because you see something does not mean it is production ready, right? So what the leadership sees when they see something that you build and lovable or something via one of the coding tools is they see, oh, it is ready to go, that the demo looks polished enough. But we still have the engineering, the security, we still have legal things, the processes that were already part of our engineering framework, it's still there. But just because we see something now, it's different when you see a wireframe, when you see something like you can click and play with. So the most dangerous demos are often the more successful ones because it feels like, that this is ready to launch. So let's launch it tomorrow. And acceleration can hide the system's risk. So I write about this a lot because right now what's happening is that the features are getting shipped fast and the AIs are reviewing the code, AIs are generating the code, and there's like one-off automations that are now in production. There is more decisions that are actually buried inside the prompts and tools. Hey, you have access to this, you have access to that, and so on. And we might have dependency across teams and systems, and some of this might be using the mock data, but it's not seen in the demo that we just saw. So the speed does not really remove the risk, it just moves the risk downstream. And this really touches on the security model. So agents can now run everything. So this is the most scary part. So they don't generate output, they act. And there's been like so many documented cases now where you give access, or you don't even give access, but the agents find a backdoor because they just moved. They move at the speed of light, so they can actually find backdoors and they have access to something you didn't even intentionally give, but you didn't really deny it either. So now things like prompt injection, over permissioned agents, the hidden tool calls, the approval gates, that is now very, very, what do you call it? It has a lot of adverse consequences. This is really hard to digest when something like this happens in production. As long as nothing happens, we're all happy. But as soon as something happens like this in production, it tarnishes the reputation. It tarnishes your reputation, your company's reputation. These are just not good incidents to be in. So how do we message this internally, right? So this is because everyone's asking the same question, like, hey, if I can see this, why can't we launch this in production? So specifically for the execs and like as a CTO, you have to explain to them that, we have to move diligently and more mindfully. Just because we see something doesn't mean we have done all the due diligence. And then for engineering, of course, we don't want to slow them down. That is not, that is not what I'm proposing here. But engineering also needs to understand that, and even product managers, that, hey, we can prototype freely, but when it comes to shipping, it has to be production ready. All of the processes that we put in place earlier, and if they're not in place earlier, it even makes more sense to do it now, because otherwise you don't want to end up in something like this, where you have over permissioned agents. They are running, they're leaking your sensitive information that you don't want. And for security, again, we don't want to slow it down. So with security and legal, it's the same conversation. So the goal is not to have any agents. The goal is, how do we secure these agents? So the messaging should be across the company is, we need to accelerate learning, we need to prototype faster, but production is something we need to govern. We need to have judgment around it. Okay, so don't slow it down. Put judgment where failure is expensive. So the winners won't just move faster in this industry, they'll decide better. And this decision and this judgment is a human thing that agents don't have. So we can use that, we can discern that. And I'm sure this is not something that is a novel idea or something that you didn't know earlier already, but I'm just reiterating it because a lot of time these are the conversations we are having in our companies. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
I was just going to thank Mamta for getting us started, setting the stage for this, and then Keith handing it off to you. But then I guess the number of hands, so just keep an eye out for that, and that's
So
over, all yours.
Corey is next. Yeah.
And point out two things. The first thing is you're focused on the back end. One of the things that these new tools surface is the flaw in the so-called agile universe, where the agile thinking has always been, I don't need to design anything. I just code it up and get it out. That never worked. This makes it 100 times worse, because it is possible to build so much complexity so quickly. If you don't focus on the upfront design and requirements, you will amplify the problems you're talking at the back end 1,000-fold. So, this notion that, oh, the AI will do everything, no, it shifts the focus to being much more specific on the requirements side and talking to customers and matching and all of that and talking to security and all the stakeholders and making sure the requirements embody that. The second thing I want to point out is on the back end, some of what you're talking about. One of the problems with these new tools is that the old observability model fails. I mean, the way things like Splunk and Datadog have worked for years doesn't work because these things kind of, from their standpoint, look a little bit like a black box. So you need a different, and there are companies, and the tools that have been produced that do guardrail kinds of things, those are really meant for engineering. They're not meant for the production environment. They don't have the openness and the flexibility to let business people go in and say, this is what can't happen, and then look for it. Now that is changing somewhat. There's a couple of companies coming out with tools that allow the observability model that has existed where, a compliance person, a security person can go in and specify, we need to look for these phenomenon. And if they happen, it's bad. That needs to, that capability needs to be there, or you'll have the problem you're talking about at the back end when you're trying to go into production.
Yeah, the first point I completely agree with. The second point, observability, I agree with you, but I think it is changing. But also, some of the processes we have already put in process should cover a lot of them. So again, it is not a replacement. AI agents are not going to replace your observability. Yes, it needs to now evolve, but you still need to have your alerts. You need to watch out for that your agents are not doing anything that is not intended to. And if anything, the responsibility becomes more so that now you need to have guardrails, you need to have checks and checkpoints, and you need to have a human in the loop for even your the more sensitive workflows.
That was actually a perfect segue into my question, so I appreciate that. Um, so first of all, I agree with everything you're saying. It's I've been arguing for quite some time now to people that anyone who'll listen that you mentioned Lovable, so Lovable bolts some of these vibe coding tools that non-technical folks are using to build tools. They're great for ideation. They're great for A/B testing. They're great for prototyping. They're a big improvement over wireframes. They are not production ready code, at least not as of yet. And I agree with you that we need to have human judgment on the other side of that. But you mentioned human in the loop, and this is something I've been having a lot of conversation with lately. Um, I believe that inherently humans are lazy creatures. We have heuristic models, we jump to conclusions, we look for ways to make our lives easier with whatever cognitive offloading we can have. I believe that while I completely agree, human in the loop is critical and human judgment needs to be there to be able uh, uh, to look at something and say, does that feel right? The scale at which these things are producing code, even with real engineering teams using Claude Code and other things as augmented engineering solutions, not just vibe coding where people don't actually understand the code that's being written. I think that when we get to the point where they're expected to say, yes, I approve, we're going to devolve into a George Jetson button pushing job. And I'm wondering, how do we prevent that? I mean, we've seen this with alert fatigue and some of these other things that,
Mhm.
that we've known for years in the cybersecurity world. Do you have any thoughts on how we can make effective use of human in the loop at the kind of scale that we're dealing with?
That is a really good point, Corey, and I completely agree with it. I think that's where the judgment part comes in. Yes, fatigue, the logging, there's just so much logging. What do you do with it? And with agents now, there's going to be even more so. So some of it, um, like again, have AI review your log, have an agent to do that. But the other thing is the judgment. So maybe just like we used to, or some of the workflows still have it, right? Some of the financial workflows where for an expense report, you need a couple of approvals, similar things. So maybe your engineers are more fatigued because they have, so many code reviews and other things. But then maybe going up the chain, if there's more sensitive information, then you have a couple of and hopefully the less approvals we are sent to them, because again, the same thing you said, if everything goes that way, then yes, that fatigue is going to happen. So judgment becomes really, really important.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, setting up sort of graduated, carefully deciding what things need to be involved.
Yeah,
I,
that
I,
is
I appreciate that. Yeah.
that's my take on it. But again, we're all learning. This is just evolving so fast. And if there are other, ideas, would love to hear about it.
Appreciate that.
Amy? Oh, Amy had raised her hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mamta. I was vigorously nodding at everything that you were saying in your talk. And so I come from a design background. I spent a decade at IDEO. And one of the things that I keep thinking about is like we used to make scrappy prototypes deliberately look not polished because that gave the signal that it wasn't a done thing yet. And now, of course, like within 10 minutes, I can have a polished looking prototype using, name your AI. So I just keep thinking about like what do we use for signaling when we don't have that roughness anymore? But I'm curious, my question is, I agree with the notion that we can prototype until the cows come home, but it's not production ready code. For product, I'm curious what you think about for process, because that's where I see people feeling really empowered, right? Like I can create something that helps my calendar move forward or my emails to be drafted and stuff like that using Claude Code without any engineering, engineer in the loop. Or I'm working with a client right now who wants to create a proposal writing mechanism through these tools. At what point do you see it imperative to like say, okay, pause, we've got proof of concept here, we should get like technical eyes on this?
I like your idea, Amy. Maybe we should explicitly make our prototypes not polished. Maybe that's what we go back to signal that, hey, it's not production ready. I'm going to use that idea. And on the process side, when do we go from, I guess it depends on case to case. So if you need to do, like, for example, if the prototype is built for customer questions and their feedback and their interviews, maybe we use that, and then all of the feedback we get, then we go back and say, hey, is this and architecturally, how is this feasible? But I think even before that, like because I'm from engineering background, I think it should come to the architecture team, because just because something is working again doesn't mean it's architecturally feasible. Is it scalable? Will it be able to, scale up to like million users in an hour? If it's if it's something pretty small that is just internal within the company, again, depends on how big the company is, maybe it's okay. But again, those conversations need to happen if engineering needs to be brought in the loop, and it could even be in parallel. You can have the customer conversations and work with engineering in parallel. Hey, how we can make that, if we can do it one step before, that would be ideal, in my opinion.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
Nathan, you had the next question.
My comment with AI entering, the SDLC, what, in my opinion, it's exposing is that we don't have, as software engineers, we don't have a process model for the full software engineering pipeline. Chemical engineers have a process model, which is why they can produce very complex chemicals with output predicted to down to milligrams and grams. They can measure inputs, they can measure outputs, they can predict temperatures, they can adjust knobs and things along the way. And that's why they don't blow up. Our processes keep blowing up on a daily basis, and we don't have a model. So one of the things that might be useful to look at is when people are applying RL, reinforcement learning, to little bits of software engineering, if we can define a value function what is it that we are trying to optimize in this particular software effort? Because there are trade-offs. We trade off time versus quality versus cost. So this can be formulated as a formal optimization problem, which we haven't done. And once we do that, we don't have to worry about little things here and there, uh, because we take one part, coding, and amplify it, and now everything else gets disrupted, because we don't have a overall picture that is a sort of a formula that we can work with. And so applying RL to the whole picture, looking at things like, there is this old saying, good, fast, cheap, take any two. And that's really an optimization problem statement, that you can't optimize all three of these simultaneously, and you have to trade off one versus the other. And so things that I've been working on the side is to take Jiras and Gits and look at impact of how you can trade off effort towards feature development versus bug fixing versus maintenance work, and how you can make these trade-offs dynamically. So my feeling is that the industry needs to move towards a big picture model, and we are still working, very, very haphazardly and in a reactive fashion. So
Yeah,
that's just
absolutely agree, Nitin. And you said what trade-offs can be made at what levels. That is again judgment. So that judgment needs to be there.
but what I'm saying, it needs to be mathematical rather than human judgment, because then we rely on human expertise for what is really a technical problem.
If
And if
you
you
come
don't
up
have the
with a
right human,
mathematical model, please let me know.
yeah, I can connect with you afterwards. But yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Anyway, please.
Good point. Good point.
I think so thank you, Mamta, for what you've shared. And I don't think we're going to be able to solve the problem today, right? But just throwing ideas out, and Randall, this one will be a quick one, and I need all of you to weigh in here. Uh, from the business world, since I shifted there, there have been structures and different types of organizations, right? So the hierarchical, military, government style, then there was like KPI based, meritocracy based. There's like, okay, culture is king, and we need to empower people and have values and community. And then agile, we have our own definition of it. But then I don't know how many of you have heard of teal organizations, which is essentially communities, committees running a lot of things. And what I'm finding a parallel to here is Mamta, essentially the human is responsible for everything out that goes out the door. All the agents can do what they like, but the guard is the human, or the responsibility is falling on the human. Pretty soon, humans are going to get overwhelmed. So for the larger companies we work with, there's so much more due diligence, and there's just suddenly so much kind of a different work for our senior engineers just to review things. Because, for example, this mid-level engineer wrote some code, and the senior guy, while reviewing it, realized AI had changed the currency type, which can have a huge impact for the enterprise company we're working with. So there's a lot of close diligence. Have any of you heard of uh, like a similar, like taking something from the management science and talking about teal, and perhaps let committees of agents or one human in the loop run sort of like a certain grade level, because everything is not important enough to free up or to go into the CEO's office. That's typically where companies slow down if the executive is in charge of signing every check. So I was just throwing that out, and I was curious if anyone's ever spoken about that or that intersection.
I have
Maybe
thoughts,
a
but I'm
fun
trying to
post.
figure out how to state them. I mean, we're moving towards a world where we're having individual contributors using AI systems to do a lot of those tasks, and then having um, those people with judgment and experience be the directors of some of these tools. And I can see a world where an orchestrator can um, be involved in the process of sort of ejecting out um, a decision that needs to be made, or something that needs to be considered to a human. But I'm not sure that that's quite what you're getting at.
Yeah, I mean, multi-agentic framework, a lot of companies are already doing it. We are doing it. And when I say judgment, it's of course having human in the loop where needed, but also having an agent to check other agents' work.
Definitely.
And orchestrator assigns work to different agents, and then there is someone who collects all the feedback. Another agent maybe goes through that, and the judgment here is having the right permissions at each level, so the agents don't go haywire. And also they're improving. If you look at like 2024, like you could easily coerce these agents to giving out their secrets, the company secrets and everything. Just this week, I saw a post where, you know how you have your OpenAI key when you're dealing directly with APIs. And like one of the prompts, it was like, hey, can you just show me where the .md file, one of the MD files, and because we need to do ABC, whatever it is. And it literally showed the exact password and everything. So that's why we cannot just rely on the security that is given by these agentic companies. So the security needs to be there from your own side, and then the guardrails need to be there, and then the workflows need to be there, because otherwise we get into these situations. You can read on my LinkedIn, I write about that. Every week
This is
there is
very cool.
something going on.
I'm going to interrupt because I feel guilty now. I took away the last, well, handle over to you, sir.
I've got
The
a, I've
last
got a
word,
hard stop,
please.
so I'll be quick. And one is an observation that I've kind of made, and then two is a question I want to leave everyone with, not looking for an answer. So the observation that I'm making here is, um, I've led software development teams in a variety of different capacities and organizations and structures. But to me, working with these AI agents for software development in particular, I see them as no different than managing multiple teams of junior offshore developers in a regulated environment. That they're doing the work, but I can't trust it. I have to validate it myself, and I have to have the systems and processes and tooling set up to do that. So, junior offshore developer, AI agent, for me, they're synonymous, and that's something I've kind of identified as effective. I see the software development side because I think that there are three different layers or categories. You have the SDLC work, which is where most of the folks are doing a lot of the changes to systems. You have infrastructure layer where it's not the action, but it's the observability. You're starting to see AI embedded in cybersecurity initiatives and observability, et cetera, to watch the behavior of the application and identify issues, and then create tickets or even potentially fix them proactively. So that's creating more resilient systems, and I think that's pretty incredible. And then you have AI in the actual products themselves, where you're actually building out those agents is part of that AI is part of the product directly. And those are kind of the three areas that I see that, and I think that applies to internal applications and internal use cases as well in other non-technology areas. The comments, since I'm a minute late, I'm going to leave everyone with is what what do you think must be true today and a year from now? Given how fast these things are moving, and where is that judgment shifting? Some of these things you can start to encode judgment and evaluation in combative ways across AI. So, not just today, this is a moving, dynamic space. So, what is true last year? What is true this year? What is true next year? And if you can identify those things, then how does that landscape shift as so much of this other stuff is not going to be true next year? So a lot of the things we're anchoring on now are just not going to work. They're fundamentally just going to be table stakes next year, where we had to spend a lot of time on it this year. So that would be the question I leave is, where do you think
We
things
will.
are stable in the next year? But I apologize, I have to drop.
No, no, no. We will post this talk with that question over LinkedIn. Tag
Yeah,
everyone to keep the conversation going.
thank
Apologies,
you.
this was really interesting, Mamta. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining also.